Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Brian Nemhauser, and we've got the Hawk Blogger crew here, which we will get back and reintroduce you to because it's been a little while. And for folks that are joining for the first time, welcome. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel at youtube.com/hawkblogger. This is Real Hawk Talk. I think this is our 28th or 29th episode. I can't remember. 29th. It says down there in the right-hand corner. So we've got a lot to talk about today. Jeff's going to walk us through a bunch of that stuff. I wanted to start off by just thanking everybody. We had what turned out to be a record year for Hawk Blogger in terms of donations that we make to Ben's Fund. For folks that aren't familiar with what we do there, all proceeds that we get from Hawk Blogger, the website, from this show, from any kind of revenue stream we can generate for this site. And primarily, one of the big ones this year has been Hawk Blogger patrons over at Patreon, patreon.com/hawkblogger. Folks who signed up become insiders. They get extra information. They get access to us through a private Facebook group. And for some of the folks, we'll talk about in a second, they are part of the Ring of Honor and get some special bonus dibs rewards for that. Anyway, we set out a goal this year to raise $20,000 to donate to Ben's Fund, and ended up actually exceeding that. So every year we donate all the proceeds from the site, and then my wife and I, my family, we either try to match or come close to matching whatever the readers have donated. So this year we donated $30,000 total to Ben's Fund, which brings our total for what we've donated to Ben's Fund to over $100,000 over the past few years. And all that money goes to parents of kids with autism who couldn't otherwise afford treatment. And Tracy Schneider runs Ben's Fund. Ben is her and John Schneider's son. And, Tracy and I spent a lot of time talking about this. She's super thankful. Wanted me to make sure I passed along her gratitude to everybody who couldn't be there. And one of the cool things we were able to do this year is for people that were Hawk Blogger patrons that have subscribed to the site, I asked them if they wanted to get phone calls, tweets, other things from players. Russell Wilson called some folks. We had KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner. I had John Schneider call somebody and tell them they were drafted by the Seahawks, and I handed over to Pete Carroll, welcomed on the team. I mean, it was great. So, trying to create a Seahawks community that's more than just about numbers. It's more than just about shouting each other down, but, actually building a community around a game that we love and a team that we love, and giving back to folks that also care about sports, but care about, their kids and raising them as best they can. So thank you again for, watching. That's a contribution. Thank you for participating in the conversation, and thanks especially for those that have been patrons. It's huge. Made a big difference to a lot of people. So thank you guys for doing that. And with that, thank the Hawk Blogger team who helps create content and bring people here. Let's start with Evan. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be back. It's been a long time since we've talked football.
I know, right? We got a lot to catch up on. And you have some news to pass along as well for people that don't follow you on Twitter. You want to share about that?
Oh, yeah. I assume you're talking about moving to
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to enemy territory, and I'm going to lock that territory down with some Seahawks fandom, and I'm going to annoy the crap out of Cardinals fans living in Phoenix, rocking a Seahawks jersey pretty much 24/7. So I'll be diving deep into enemy territory, and I promise to uphold my duty as a Seahawks fan.
Wow. So when are you going to get your tips frosted and start wearing visors backwards and upside down? Do you have a schedule for that yet? Or
it's immediately on the schedule. That's priority number one.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. We'll be checking in with you and your transformation over time into a bro in Arizona. It's going to be great. Welcome back. Nathan Ernst. Welcome back to the show, dude. How are you doing?
Pretty good. true to form, I am arguing about whether running matters or not on Twitter as we speak. So,
yes, before we came on, I asked Nathan if he ran or passed his way to the show, and he insisted he actually passed, which I'm trying to imagine what that looks like. But even then, he insists on passing being the only way for things to work. So, always good to have you, Nathan.
I'm always trying to be as efficient as possible, so I pass my way wherever I can go.
Awesome. Last, certainly not least, Jeff Simmons up there in Toronto just got back from a Raptors game, I hear. I don't even know what how did that turn out?
It was a pretty bad game, to be honest. The Wizards kind of melted at the end. I know Ben's a big Wizards guy if you follow him on Twitter, so I could take some solace in beating him and finally in something. But the Raptors ended up winning, and they didn't look very inspiring, and it looks like they're lined up to play LeBron in the next round, so I'm not too excited. I'm not going to lie.
Wow. All right. Well, this isn't a Raptors show, so we won't.
No, I don't want to get into it.
I will say that like Nathan's Rajon Rondo profile pick is not something I'm getting a lot of enjoyment out of as a Blazers fan.
Why not? What happened?
Oh man,
what happened with Rajon Rondo?
Dude,
did I miss something?
He was. Man, the Blazers. I don't know what to do with those guys.
You trading Dame.
Oh, you don't trade Dame. That's like trading the heart and soul. Like he's not the issue, and I don't think you trade CJ either, most likely. But I don't know what else they're going to have to do there. They're the youngest team in the playoffs, finished third in the West. They had a bad draw. New Orleans is a particularly bad draw for them. They really are. I think that they would have beaten the Spurs. I think that they would have beaten a lot of the other teams other than that Pelicans team. Any team that doesn't have really good defense.
Their best player.
The Blazers' 3 strongest spots at center and 2 guards. So
yeah, it's too bad.
That was tough. Sure. So Jeff, we got so much to talk about. We got the draft. We got the schedule. Where do you want us to start?
I know the draft's probably the biggest topic. It's one of my favorite events on the sports calendar, to be honest. These next 2 days are some of my favorite TV watching days that go on. But first, I was looking back. We haven't really been on, the 4 of us, since early March. And on our last show, it was right after the Richard Sherman news came out with the release. He hadn't even signed with San Francisco yet. Michael Bennett trade just leaked out. I think that was like a couple hours before our last show. And a lot has happened since then. So the Seahawks have taken a very different approach to this offseason. It's gone in many ways. I don't think anyone predicted the way that it would go, whether it was getting rid of Sherman, seeing him go to San Francisco. Maybe once they cleared that cap room, we thought they would be more aggressive with veteran players, maybe an Ndamukong Suh or a big skill player for Russell Wilson or offensive lineman like Josh Sidden. Nope. Bunch of short-term deals, 30-year-olds, blocked a lot of their potential comp picks that were coming out. Had a lot of guys walk out of that building. So, Evan, you've seemed to be convincing yourself that you've loved this offseason. So why don't we start with this? Let's go overall impression of the offseason, what they've done so far, the players they've brought in. You can look at it from a cap perspective too. Are you still on board with everything that's happened so far?
You know, they've that's a really interesting question. Like I've kind of written in my articles, in the past few weeks, I truly believe this offseason is a cultural identity reset within that locker room. I think every move they're trying to make points towards really retooling and kind of relaunching this team for 2019. You know, Cam's probably going to be off the cap in 2019. You know, Earl might not be here. This is really a transition year. I don't I still consider them, playoff contenders and all that stuff for 2018. But I really look at this year as a kind of a reset in terms of their identity within the locker room and the players that, they want in there on that squad. And, they had to make some painful decisions. And whether it's Richard Sherman, Michael Bennett, Sheldon, I will highlight one situation. I could not be more ecstatic about how they treated the Sheldon situation. I think, signing those 2 Viking teammates for I think half the cost of Sheldon, I think was a brilliant move. I think Sheldon obviously, holds a much higher ceiling and, has way more potential and is younger and all that stuff. But I thought they navigated those waters really well. This draft is going to be fascinating just in terms of we're talking about different positions and skill groups they're going to target, but I'm really fascinated to see the types of personalities they pursued this draft. Obviously John and Pete were talking in the press conference the other day about how they're kind of limiting their draft board and they're not making excuses for certain guys anymore. I'm really, really curious to see if there's any difference in the types of personalities they pursue, whether that be character differences, all that stuff. So going to be a big few days. Definitely going to be a wild ride. Exciting though.
Nathan, I'd like you to chime in because you've been one of the more vocal opinions about what they've done with their free agent sign. It's kind of neutralized the comp picks that were lined up for Jimmy Graham, Sheldon Richardson, Paul Richardson. That looked like an area where they can really pounce on if the plan was to build it 2019. So now that the whole picture is kind of a little more complete heading into the draft, are you still a little underwhelmed with what they did in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I think the overall strategy was the right thing to do, right? Kind of tear down, retool, and try to get healthier in the cap and go short-term deals and all that stuff. But I think that they kind of lost it in the details when they went out and grabbed a bunch of these guys that are going to cost them comp picks now, right? For people who don't know, basically it's a kind of a one in, one out. So if you lose Sheldon Richardson, you're going to get some comp pick based on the contract he got. But then if you go sign some other free agent, even if it's Shamar Stevens, those two cancel each other out. So even if somebody you bring in somebody on a 1 year, what's that?
Can we agree that that's stupid?
It is, yeah. It's not great.
Okay.
But it is what it is, right? So we went out and they got some of these guys like and Tom Johnson, Shamar Stevens, John Brown, Ed Dixon. These are fine players. They'll play a role. They'll be okay. They're not going to contribute to this team long term the way maybe a mid-round draft pick might. And they're not going to contribute that much more than other guys that maybe they could have gotten later that wouldn't have cost against the comp picks. They also gave some of these guys some longer term money. Like Ed Dixon is going to count against their cap for a couple of years, and I don't really get that. Why did you need to commit to Ed Dixon? I get that he's interesting. I get that you need tight end help, but is he really that much better than someone that you could have gotten for closer to a 1 year bet min type deal? Probably not. So overall, the approach, I was fine with it, but I think that in the specifics, there was a lot to be desired.
And Brian, we haven't heard from you on the show since that early March. I might be wrong here, but I can sense your enthusiasm for the 2018 Seahawks isn't quite maybe what it was the last 5 years. Maybe it's been I might be completely off base, but I just get the sense from you haven't been too inspired by their offseason. Am I wrong here?
No, you're not wrong. I mean, I'm of the mind right now that the Seahawks have what's the best way to put it? They're talented enough that there's no team that they should be outmatched against. Even the Rams. They should be able to compete in every game when you have Russell Wilson at quarterback, when you've got DJ Fluker on the offensive line. I mean, come on. When you still got KG Wright and Bobby Wagner and Shaq Griffin and as of now Earl Thomas and Frank Clark. I mean, there's talent there. So this is not a team that's bereft of talent, but I don't see right now any path, no matter how well the draft goes, that this team is a contender next year. I have a really hard time wrapping my head around that as a ceiling. And maybe there are some scenarios, but you're talking about a lot of variables falling in your favor for that to happen, like a significant amount. In past years, it didn't feel as much that way. It felt like if the Seahawks played to their, to their talent, then they should actually contend for the Super Bowl that year. I don't think that's the case right now. I think some of that's the Seahawks. Some of that's teams like the Rams getting, I think, significantly more talented. Some of that's, I think, the 49ers are going to be more talented. I don't think they're quite as great as everyone thinks they're going to be, especially 49ers fans. This just feels like a year that was a teardown to get to 2019. And that's definitely not a Pete Carroll, John Schneider philosophy. I'll throw out there that one of my questions is, like, if 2018 doesn't go well, let's just play a scenario where they turn out they're like 7-9, and they don't make the playoffs. Maybe even worse. Is there a chance that Pete and John are gone?
I think John's on the hot seat. You saw them go in. They cleared out all their coaches. There's two people left, right? That if there is blame that needs to continue to go somewhere, right? There's two people left that you're going to look at. It's not a Tom Cable problem anymore, right? It's not assuming this doesn't go well, which there's going to be people blaming
Tom Cable for whatever happens this year.
Well, he did ruin all of these offensive linemen for life. So
all right.
I was going to chip in with this little optimistic spin here, guys. Who has been our absolute nightmarish terror for the past 5 to 6 years? His name is Timothy Tom Cable. Tom Cable was fired. I just want to remind you guys all of that. Tom Cable was fired.
Let's just say it does go bad for whatever reason. If it goes bad, there's only two people left to really point fingers at. And I think if you made me choose today, if I could only keep one, I would probably keep Schneider just because of age more than anything. But Pete's the boss. So unless Pete is planning to fire himself or Allen just comes in over the top, Pete went in, cleared out his coaches. If he needs another scapegoat, that person is going to be John. So I think John, I don't expect him to be fired. I think it's a low probability, but I think John's realistically on the hot seat. In terms of they need to perform. They can't have another bad year. If they disappoint again, if they miss the playoffs again, if it's ugly and there's more weird stuff that we've seen the last year, John's shouldn't feel super comfortable, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think we've got Evan, who's got the hot air balloon philosophy that basically the only thing weighing the Seahawks down from succeeding was Tom Cable, and they've gotten rid of that sandbag now. And maybe Darrell Bevel was another sandbag, and they're just going to rise now.
You're not wrong.
They've gotten rid of that weight that was holding them down.
No, I will chip in on this though. I do agree with Nathan that this draft is really, really big for John Schneider. I think they've got to get back to their ways. I don't know whatever they need to do. I'm not a draft guy, but they've got to nail some of these picks, and we need guys to contribute on day one. We need the Shaq Griffins of the world to really nail down in this draft if John wants to feel comfortable in this job.
I know we're already off the rails, Jeff. I'm sorry, but Can we for a second talk about Scott McCloughan, because this came up again this week, and this is just a pet peeve of mine. So there's this narrative out there that the only reason the Seahawks ever drafted well is Scott McCloughan. And first of all, Scott McCloughan's awesome. We've done a lot of Scott McCloughan love fest on this show because we all really respect him as a scout. We've seen how he's built up a lot of teams. He's had a Midas touch. He is great. So it's not about that. But he wasn't here in 2010. He didn't come until after the draft. That was a draft that netted you Earl Thomas and Russell Okung and Golden Tate and Cam Chancellor and Walter Thurman. Those all came before Scott McCloughan. So those aren't Scott McCloughan picks. And then Scott McCloughan was around till after the 2014 draft. He did 2013, 2014. Those were two of the shittiest drafts this team's had. So if he was such a Midas touch, and it was the whole reason, why just those drafts, 2011 and 12, that were totally about McCloughan? I just think there's a false narrative out there that means oh yeah, I forgot John Schneider. He has no ability to do any good drafts or personnel decisions. He totally relied on Scott McCloughan for all that. Where's the evidence of that? Can you guys help me out with that?
My guess would be because of what happened in San Francisco, the same pattern. I think it just makes it too convenient. McLuhan built that Niners team that competed with the Seahawks earlier in the decade. And when McLuhan left and Trent Baalke took over, their drafts immediately deteriorated.
It doesn't help that he also then left Seattle to go to Washington, and Washington reeled off a couple drafts that were way better than Seattle's. So there's just a lot of, I don't know what the right
dot connecting
bias is, but yeah.
So there's agreement. Scott McLuhan's great. I don't think anyone's arguing that. Are we also on the same page that he does not get credit for everything that the Seahawks became from a personnel perspective?
I think a big part of that was, I think a big part of those drafts were Pete knowing the college players from his time at USC. I think he had inside information, and I think that once that kind of wore off, once his recruiting classes, and that kind of lines up with 2012, because that's the 4 years he was recruiting back, I think that was a huge factor because that's how you found Richard Sherman. That's how you found Golden Tate.
I 100% agree. 100% agree. I think it's one of the least discussed factors of their early draft success is Pete was recruiting all these guys. He had inside information on a bunch of people, and he admitted it. He's like, we're nearing the tail end of, how much in touch he was with those players. I don't think it was as clean as 2012. I think he had some more information. 2013 was one of the worst drafts talent-wise across the league. I mean, just look at the fact that the Seahawks have had like almost every one of the top 10 players drafted that year on their roster over the past few years. I mean, those guys are available because they're just not that good. So that draft was just a loser, period. And then wasn't 2014, was that Lockett and Frank Clark? Were they?
No, that was a year.
That was 15. Yeah.
That was Rickerson, Britt.
Right.
Cassius Marsh.
Right.
Kevin Norwood.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that's a good point about Carroll. I think McLuhan absolutely was part of what was working there. I mean, there's a bunch of factors there. I just think I wanted to pierce that myth, that pop that balloon a little bit. Like John Schneider's plenty good at what he does. He doesn't need Scott McLuhan to.
I want to double back on something Nathan was saying because my overall impression of the offseason is just Schneider seems reinvigorated. Maybe it's because he's on the hot seat. The way he's approached free agency has been like, I know that rumor came out from, I think it was Bob Condotta. They're just leaving offers on the table, and the people who want to come are coming to Seattle. They're not negotiating. The way they approach the draft board, they're going back to how they're taking guys off the draft board. It seems that Schneider's kind of knows. Maybe it was the Malik McDowell thing or the Sheldon Richardson trade. If you look at the last 5 drafts and the free agency in 2017 with Jokel and Blair Walsh and Eddie Lacy and even Kerry Williams and the Jimmy Graham trade, and there's a lot of mistakes from Schneider. His resume the last 5 years. So my question to you guys is, going into a draft where they really need to, how much do you trust them? How much do you really trust this guy? Because I know a couple of years ago, this guy was like untouchable. Number 1 general manager. I don't know who wants to jump in here, but the thing that I get from Seahawks fans is they don't trust Schneider the way they did even a year or 2 ago.
I got roasted for that, by the way, on Twitter last year. I just want to point out, I said something to the effect of, it feels like fans are starting to get ready to turn on Schneider, and if they have another bad season torpedoed by poor offensive line play, y'all are going to be going nuts. And people got pissed at me. Similarly to how people got mad at me for the Blair Walsh thing when in the preseason, I'm like, this guy's not actually doing good. Why are we talking about this? Anyway, now we're here, and like he's halfway, like he's kind of legitimately like having to GM for his job. I forgot what the question was. I just wanted to say suck it to everyone that disagreed with me last year.
What percentage of Nathan's takes are
100%?
Told you so. Come on, dude. Nobody's always right. We value integrity here, so you definitely get credit for those takes, though. Your Jimmy Graham 15 touchdown.
That was close.
That was close. Close. I don't know, Evan. You're John Schneider's love child, or wish you were. Like, what's your take on this?
I don't know. I think we're overreacting a little bit. I don't disagree that this draft is really important for John and the team, but I mean, this is like the first year we haven't made the playoffs in how many years? Like like the last time we didn't make the playoffs, I was essentially like a 6-year-old. Like, come on, it's been a while. I know there's been some poor drafts.
Didn't they miss the playoffs in 2011?
2011.
So that puts you at
16.
13?
16.
All right.
Yeah,
that adds up. That sounds right.
No, but I think one draft that doesn't get enough talk is the 2015 draft. Like, they got 2 really solid contributors out of that draft. They got Frank Clark, who's an absolute stud in terms of playing on the field. And then we have Tyler Lockett, who's dealt with some pretty crazy injuries, but definitely has the talent and is definitely good. Obviously, there's been some rough patches. But, I mean, John Schneider's singular job is not just drafting. It's extending players. It's, free agent acquisitions, which have been rough recently too. My mind immediately goes to the Luke Jokel free agent decision. But there's obviously been some good ones too, like the Justin Coleman trade, with Cassius Marsh to the Patriots. So I wouldn't go as far as Nathan says on this whole John Schneider hot seat thing, but I'd say I do agree that this draft is very, very important for him.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to think about it from a position perspective. People think about it from a draft year perspective. They think about it from sometimes a cap management perspective. But look, I mean, if you look at every player that Schneider's added, whether it's undrafted free agents, draft, personnel, like free agent signings, cornerback, pretty damn strong. Like, how many times have they really missed? Even their like Mohamed Cisse looked promising. These guys that they bring in from nowhere that they all look like they could hang. And that's not just Schneider. That's also a fit with Carroll and what he does back there.
Yeah.
I think you could say linebacker has been pretty good. Malcolm Smith and KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner and a lot of the guys they filled in there have worked out. Along the defensive line, I think they have a pretty good idea of what they're looking for, especially on the interior side. Naz Jones and I would say all the way back to Colin Cole, like the guys they've filled in have played reasonably well. They haven't been busts. I don't think they're like super struggling there. Wide receiver, I think, has been okay. Like, I think there's position players where there's there's consistent strength. And then there's like offensive line, quarterback. Like, yes, Russell Wilson hit, but every other quarterback decision they made from the moment they got here back to like Charlie Whitehurst has been like horrible or really questionable. Tavares Jackson and like that's not a good. They're not good at evaluating quarterbacks from my point of view. They had one, but one out of however many. Offensive line been pretty bad. Pass rushers, they hit with Frank Clark. They've been pretty bad otherwise. So anyway, I just think that if you look at that, I think there's some trends there that are pretty consistent across all of the years about where they're good and where they're not.
So, sorry, to go back to the John Schneider hot seat thing for a minute. To be clear, I don't want to fire John Schneider. I don't think John Schneider should be fired. This is a, if it goes wrong type thing, then I think there's a chance there's going to be talk of Schneider going out and whether he should go out or not, right?
That's a hot take, Nathan.
Wait, hold up. Is Pete Carroll included this? Say the Seahawks go 5-11 next year.
I mean, it depends on a lot of things, right? Like, why did they go 5-11, right?
Yeah.
If Russell gets hurt, then this is all moot, right? But if there's other stuff, then I would say that, like, if they have a bad year and they go 5-11, I think there's probably like a 33% chance Schneider gets fired, right? Like, so it's like realistic. I don't think it'll happen, and that's if it goes wrong, But it'll be interesting. I mean, I don't know. This team's in such a weird position. You could see so many different scenarios happening, and it wouldn't shock me. So,
yeah, and Schneider's, from a pure theory standpoint, Schneider's manipulated the draft pretty well the last 2 years. Like, he's loaded up on those mid-second and day 2 picks, and just the execution of those picks has been horrible. Like, they had how many round 3 picks last year? Like 4 or 5. They were loaded with capital. The year before, too, they had Reese Odiombo and Procise and Nick Fournette. So from a theory standpoint, they're doing the right things. It's a couple things, and maybe last year in the first round, that's a perfect example where they got too cute. They moved down 3 times, and almost every player that they passed on with that second move down turned out to be a very good player. And the guy they got, obviously it's bad luck, but so it seems like John's kind of reevaluating pretty much everything he's done. And that's what makes this draft coming up so fascinating. But just shifting back to Pete, I want to hear your guys' takes on this, because one of the most interesting talks around Seattle and almost the NFL last week was that comment that came out from Greg Bishop that Pete Carroll's now denied, but kind of gave us a sense of what's going on with the team. There's that story that Michael Bennett was reading books during team meetings. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but are you more concerned that Sherman and Bennett have kind of lost the message, or are you more concerned that Pete's giving the same message over and over and over, and the players are getting bored by it? Where do you guys find that fault? I don't know who wants to jump in here first, but I think there's a lot to take away from that whole conversation.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't hear this specific conversation. The whole thing around Carroll right now, though, with how his message stays fresh, how vets respond to his message, it's really concerning to me. Well, I don't know if it's really concerning to me. It would be really concerning to me if I was Pete, right? And Pete carries himself in a way and all that stuff. You know, he has philosophies, and it feels like a lot of that has broken down. And I feel like they've admitted that as much, right? And so I don't know what it means, like, for the team necessarily. But it doesn't feel like Pete has been effective at the things he's trying to do. And hopefully they adapt to that. But it's just, it feels like a failure, and we'll see what that means long term. We'll see if they can correct or not. But I think that we saw that Pete just wasn't effective at the things that he wanted to be effective at. From everything from believing in, you know, running and playing defense, to believing in competing forever and, you know, or win forever and all that stuff. It just feels like he lost it.
Brian or Evan, do you want to jump in on this?
Brian,
I was trying to give Evan the space, but since he's not jumping in, I mean, look, some of it's definitely Pete, but I think there's something to when you win a Super Bowl. I think there's people underestimate how hard it is to really build the desire back, climb the mountain again. And they went there back-to-back years. That happened. It wasn't like, you know, they lost all ability. And even in 2015, they were really humming at the end of the year. They really were in a good place. But it feels like, from my perspective, it's a combination of factors. One part of it is, I don't know. I don't think it's about Pete. I don't know that the team had the same shared focus about what their goal was after they won that Super Bowl. You know, you had holdouts, you had, you know, some more fracturing in the locker room. You had players that were blowing up as their own celebrities. And I'm not the football player. I'm not in the locker room. I will admit, like, my whole life, I was climbing that mountain towards, a championship. That was like a point. I wanted to have that experience in my life. And once the team won it, I'll admit here on the show that I'm driving, part of, I didn't care as much anymore. Like that thirst was quenched a little bit. Like, my passion about it changed significantly. I hoped that it would be like sex. You have it the first time and you're like, can't wait to do that again. And, but it was not like that. And I don't think it was like that for the players. I think that they got to the mountaintop, and I don't think that they had the same unquenchable passion to get back there that they did before. And I think that eroded. I'm not sure that was a coachable situation. I think that part of that is the type of personalities that they brought together.
But they went on, and like those guys that held out, they paid them, right? They brought those guys back. I mean, it's not Pete's fault that maybe that got lost and that happened. But it is Pete and John's fault that they continued to bring those guys back in and didn't, always compete those guys out the door.
I agree with that, Nathan. And one of the things that's actually, I talked to John about this topic recently, and I won't get into specifics, but look, I will say what my point of view was there. I won't share his, but it was a tough situation, right? Where these weren't players that were 35 or 33. They weren't players that were kind of good. In a lot of cases, these were the best players at their position in the entire league. And to walk away from them when they would have had to walk away from them, it might have been the absolute right move. But it wasn't even like what Belichick does. Like Chandler Jones was not the best pass rusher, or some of the players that they moved on. He was not the best at his position. So I think those are really hard calls, and I guess I can understand why they made the calls they did. It certainly didn't turn out to result in multiple rings.
Well, I think we all know why Bennett and Sherman aren't back. I think that's kind of cleared up when we were really sort of confused by those moves when they first happened, right? But let's move the conversation a little bit forward. We mentioned this is a huge draft coming up. Seattle hasn't drafted well the last 5 years. I thought a Malik McDowell thing has kind of showed a lot of Seattle's draft records been out on Twitter, and people have been doubting this team for a while. So there's a lot going on. There's still the Earl Thomas rumor lingering around. That's still unclear. But the big question now, I guess, is does Seattle pick at 18? They have two holes in their draft right now. They don't have the second-round pick they gave up for a year of Sheldon Richardson. That turned out to blow up in their face. They gave up the third-round pick for Dwayne Brown. I don't have a problem with that. They need a left tackle so bad, and Dwayne Brown's one of the best part of their team right now. But I know we've had some people who are certain to stay at 18. They got to trade down. But overall, what do you want to see them do these next 2 days, maybe these next 3 days? Because right now, when they were at their best, they weren't trading down. They weren't stockpiling picks. They were just hitting players in different rounds, and they haven't had a position like this probably since 2011. So with the clear hole in their draft, maybe I'll start with you, Brian. What are you hoping to see just from an overall perspective?
Oh man, come back to me. I've been talking a lot. Let's start with Evan and
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think I'd love to see them slide back like 5 or 6 spots and recoup a couple day 2 picks. Whether that's a second or third rounder. Obviously I'm a huge fan of Earl Thomas, but if Jerry Jones can't quench it, just is starving for Earl's presence and he's willing to give up a first-round pick and maybe a little more, I think you do it. I love Earl, but those first-round picks and just picks in general are so valuable in the NFL in terms of rebuilding a roster from the ground up with cheap rookies and club control that comes with all that. But I really don't want to see them slide out of the first round. I really like you said, Jeff. I feel like they just traded back too far last year and missed out on a lot of premium talent. And a lot of it depends on who's available. But I'd love to see them target either a defensive back or O-line. That'd be 2 position groups that I would love to see them target early and often. I'm very curious to see what they do with Solari at the helm of the offensive line.
What about you, Nathan?
I want to see him move back as well. I actually want to see him make a bigger jump back. I don't. I think that there's been a lot of talk about this. That this is maybe about a 15-player. A group of 15 players that have a legit first round grade. And so Seattle's obviously on the outside of that. And this is interesting too, because it's a little deeper in that middle tier of talent. You can get similar players from kind of where Seattle is, well down, maybe even down into early parts of the third round. And this is an interesting year too, where you've got a few teams who have a lot of second round draft capital. You've got the Browns who have 3 picks. You've got, I think Indianapolis has a couple picks in the second round. The Giants have a second and then a couple early thirds. So you have a lot of opportunity here to to jump way back, not way back, like way back into the second round. I think you want to still try to stay up towards the top of the second round. But collect 2 or 3 picks that are good picks, and that in this draft are going to be, basically as valuable as where you are at 18. And then there's a lot of options. I mean, from there, right? You've got offensive linemen that should still be alive. You've got defensive linemen that should still be alive. You've got potentially some cornerbacks who are cool, like Isaiah Oliver. If they decide to break that trend, you've got even options at running back that would sting a little bit less. And I'm just saying, if you're gonna do it, it's gonna sting a little less if you at least move back a ways before you do. So yeah, I think they've got a chance to jump down, grab a bunch of picks, fix their draft, and I don't think it'll hurt them too much in terms of the talent that'll be available.
All right, Nathan, you're on record. You want the Seahawks to trade up for a running back?
That's what I heard.
That's what I heard.
That's right. Saquon Barkley, all the way.
Oh, man.
Heard number 4 is available.
It's interesting. I was firmly at first on the do not trade back. They need to get a premium talent. With all these quarterbacks in the draft, picking at 18, I thought they would be a position where a premium player would fall to them, given that it's more or less the 15th best player in the draft. But I've really dug into the draft the last month or so, and I did a mock draft on Hawk Blogger, and I think the Colts GM brought this up this week. There's really only 8 to 10 blue chip players in this draft. I went through the list. There's I'd say about 10 that would really fit Seattle right now. But if you add that in the 4 quarterbacks, I don't think any of them get to 18. And given what Nathan was saying, the real strength of this draft is kind of the 28 to 60 area. There's a lot of good players. It's deep, and there's a lot of areas that can help Seattle. Cornerback, interior offensive line. They need a left guard still, unless we're certain Ethan Posick can play there. Running back, pass rusher. They need help at all 3 levels of their defense. So I've completely flipped my mind. I'm with you guys. I think they got to move back. I loved them to pick at the end of the first round, but I think if you can recoup that, teams like what Nathan was saying, they have all those seconds. I know the Colts have 3 seconds. They even have the original Seattle one that came from the Jets in the Sheldon Richardson trade. I think Seattle has so many holes. They really need to get back in that middle, 2nd and 3rd round area and fill 3 to 4 holes, because I don't think you're going to get a player at 18 that would have been worth to stick it and not make that trade. The only lever that gives you that other option is Earl. And it doesn't seem like now that Dallas is going to give up that first rounder. I think they want to give up their second and trade pick 50 for Earl. To me, it just seems like a bad deal.
I don't think they're getting a first for Earl, though.
No, I think that's the whole.
They better not be getting Earl Thomas, because Earl Thomas is worth a damn first-round pick.
But then they're just going to let him walk.
No, this I would threaten to tag him. I hate this idea of just let him walk. No, you got the Seahawks have the leverage. Tag his ass.
I don't know. That just, you get into a bad situation there. It gets acrimonious. You lose any kind of long-term leverage. Like Mr. Capman over here. I bet you could tell me a little bit about the advantages of an Earl extension, right? And you lose all that. So I don't know if that's really as much leverage. Like you could get into a big wrestling match with him over it, and you could tag him, and sure, you'll keep him around, but is he going to be dissatisfied? What is that going to do for your cap? I mean, I don't know. It makes sense.
Or we could pay him.
You could pay him. I just don't think. I don't think they are. I don't think they're going to pay him. Yeah, if they're going to pay him, this wouldn't be a thing.
Yeah. I think they're scared of the Cam Chancellor situation, to be honest.
Wouldn't you be?
It just feels like they're different players in terms of I don't know. I know the Cam neck stinger is pretty random, but
Cam was showing signs of decline, though.
That's the thing.
Beyond the injuries, they've both had some injuries now, right? But Earl's still
been pretty freak though. Cam injured Earl, didn't
he?
Yeah.
This was not like Earl just running and he tore his ACL.
Yeah.
Cam collided with him midair.
But Earl has now been injured 2 years in a row. Not at the same level of significance, but he has, after not missing any games, he's missed games in each of the past 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the health thing is still there, but Earl has come back from it, right? Like Cam got hurt a couple times, and then you could just tell that he just looked older, he looked slower, whether injuries or just wear and tear or just age or what. Like he looked like he was declining as a player. Earl has had injuries, but he looks like Earl when he's out there.
He does, no doubt about it. I thought he had a strong year last year.
Mm-hmm.
I also I do not discount, and I never will, him saying he was going to retire after he was injured the first time. That was real. No matter how much Pete Carroll and other people try to downplay it, like Earl is not all in. Like he has married now, and he has the rings, and he's like, his motivation is I don't think something you can count on. And certainly if you start screwing with him from a contract perspective, there's question about what's going to happen there. He's already also declared that he wants to play for another team at some point. Like there's a lot of question marks that, as far as giving him a long-term deal, I would have pause about. And his time horizon, like how long. Ed Reed and those guys are good. Were top-notch safeties into their early 30s. Are the Seahawks going to be back to being a contending team by the time Earl is still, around? And will that have been money well spent, or would you be better off, getting what you can now and starting to build up and create some space for guys like Delano Hill and others to step forward? So, I don't know. I think that there's more reasons to potentially move on from Earl than to keep him. And I've certainly been of the mind that, like, I don't think you're going to be a better team by doing that anytime soon. I think he's a generational safety, but my general look at when I see the Seahawks is they're not in rebuild, but they are in reset, and they need all the ammunition they can get to try to start the next run. And I don't think the next run starts this year. I think the earliest it would start would be 2019, and it might really realistically be 2020 before they're really set to contend again.
It's going to be fun to look back on this podcast when we're Super Bowl champions.
I'd be happy about that. Of all the things to be wrong about, this would be one of them. Yeah, so, and as far as like getting picks, I get it. I definitely do, and that's always been my general philosophy: is accumulate picks, and I value that. I'm still on team don't trade down in this case. Like
who's your guy though? Who's the guy that's worth it?
The guy that they pick that works out and is great. Like there's not that's not what it's about for me, Nathan. It's not that there's a specific guy that like has to be there. For me, it's not going to stack up statistically, other than if you look at players that are picked in the top 20 versus even 21 through 32. I do think there's some differences in terms of ceiling across history, and there's a lot of reasons that might be the case. It's just a gut instinct that we'll see what happens come. No one expected Steve Hutchinson to be available when the Seahawks drafted him. He fell to them, and they didn't necessarily even have a clear need, but that was great, and they found him. He was, I think, actually 20. No, maybe he was 18 or 17, and it was Sean Alexander that was 22. But anyway, they're right around each other. So yeah, it's just a gut instinct over years of watching this. I feel like that 18 is high and high enough that they could potentially get something that's really meaningful. And kind of in the opposite, I'm not seeing like some great value. I'm sick of seeing them get these, above average starters. Like I want to see that. I want to see them, if anything, I'd rather them trade up and consolidate picks. If there's someone that they believe is a blue chip, go out and get them. Like I come away with one player, the quality of Cam Chancellor or Earl Thomas or Richard Sherman or Bobby Wagner or KJ Wright, or like come away with a Pro Bowler, one Pro Bowler from this draft. And, I will think that will be more successful than coming away with 3, average starters.
But what's the best way to ensure that you get that Pro Bowl guy? Is it to roll the dice once, or is it to roll the dice 3 times?
Yeah, I mean, I know exactly where you're going from a statistic standpoint. I could also come back with like percentage of Hall of Famers that were out of the first round versus ones that were in every other round combined versus first rounders. Pretty big disparity.
I mean, totally. Like if this was a lot of other drafts, I think what you're saying would make sense, right? And there are guys that like you see sometimes that kind of get down towards Seattle where it's like, boy, that'd be interesting. Like I think Jeff, you had him taking Harold Landry, right? That's interesting. Derwin James, that's where you start to, those are guys that give you pause and stuff. But to not pick again until like 120, is it?
120, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
So that I agree with.
So hard.
That I agree with. I think I guess that's the combination for me is I'd want them to stick, trade Earl, and get picks to fill in that gap. Like I'd look for accumulating picks a different way. Doesn't mean that they're gonna be able to do that. And if they can't, it doesn't really matter what I think for a variety of reasons. But most meaningfully, because they're gonna trade back. I mean, like the chances of them sticking where they are, like given their situation, are super low. I'm totally aware of that. It's just not. It's not what I would do in this situation. And
so what makes this draft so interesting from Seattle perspective is one of the areas that they've kind of got themselves in trouble in, and John admitted at that press conference the other day, is they've really been drafting for team need, and I think that led them to taking Jermaine Ifedi in the first round, and why they've focused purely on Malik McDowell because they didn't get Calais Campbell in free agency, and why they traded for Sheldon Richardson to fill that spot. Right now, where the roster stands with all these one-year contracts, and they've got like $90 million in cap room next year, or maybe $100 million, they need guys everywhere. They need new core players. So John was at his best when he was just drafting players, evaluating players, not trying to fill needs, and that's what makes, I think for me, why I want so many more picks is because they need help everywhere. They need help at all 3 levels on their defense. They need a wide receiver. They need a tight end. They need a running back. They need a left guard. They need a backup quarterback. So to me, that's what makes it so interesting, because there's not one area you can really focus on, because really
isn't that an argument that you can make the opposite argument? That they do they do have needs at every position, pretty much, even quarterback, kicker, punter, like every position they have a need. Isn't that an argument to stay where you are and take the very highest guy on your draft board, regardless of what position he is? Like, isn't that a counter to that point?
I mean, again, I think when you only have 7 picks in the draft, when you have so many holes to fill, like it'd be one thing if they had their full complement and you wanted to just take a guy high and hope that you just shut that need down for a while because you took a blue chip guy, right? Whatever that means. But they're going to look at like trying to grab somebody at 18 who, when listing off names, it's like, well, Harold Landry. Okay, well, he's a defensive end. You have 2 of those, right? Like the chance that the guy that is available there that's a blue chipper that lines up with one of your needs, like, isn't a guarantee. And then you don't have another chance to address any of the other positions. Like, and it's not just that there's needs across the team. I think the Seahawks have the smallest roster in the NFL right now, right? 66 players. They don't even have a full roster. Like, even in looking at how many they'll come away with adding an undrafted free agency, like they're a long ways away from building in this roster. It sucks because I do the mock draft games and all that stuff, right? And like you sit there and your pick comes up at 18 and it's like, I like a lot of these players. They're cool. But it's just like, okay, I could take the cool player now and then like pick through the I don't want to say the dumpster. I do want to say the dumpster, but it's not the dumpster, right? But then, go gambling, 100 and some odd picks later. And it's just, it doesn't lead to a satisfying draft. It doesn't, it doesn't help the team, I don't think. So it's just tough. Also, from a pure entertainment perspective, I don't want to have to wait however long. I don't want to wait at all, period. Yeah. I definitely don't want to wait that long. This would be miserable as a Seahawks fan if they just picked at 18 and it's like, all right, well, I'll see you Saturday.
So let me just put a hypothetical out. And I think I know where you guys answer, but I'm curious. 2 scenarios. One, the Seahawks actually packaged picks trade up into the top 10, pick somebody. Scenario number 2, I'm not talking about likelihood. I'm just talking about how you'd feel about it. Scenario 2, they trade down and add, let's say, 2 third-round picks. Not a second, but 2 third-round picks. So they move back into the 20s with their first, and they somehow get 2 third-round picks for that, or a third and a fourth. Which scenario would you be more excited about? Don't think. Just which would you be like? Which would you be more excited about?
Excited? I think it's the first one, but I don't know if that's the rational, the rational hope. If they trade up, it better be a blue chip player and somebody they absolutely love. So the first one would be really exciting to see John move up for somebody. Oh my God, that'd be crazy to see the Seahawks do that. But
if you're sitting there and like the draft's at 7, and all of a sudden you see that logo switch to the Seahawks,
right?
That'd be amazing. And it would give me it would probably, like, they just traded their entire draft for somebody and it'd give me my weekend back. I mean, that's not all bad.
And Barkley's still available at 7.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh boy.
I would pay good money. I might turn our donation next year to whoever could make that happen.
Can you
just
imagine?
to see Nathan's face.
But the amazing thing is they would take somebody else, and everyone would be mad. Analytics Twitter would be mad because they traded up. Running backs matter. Twitter would be furious because they passed on a generational talent. Can we stop saying generational talent? I'm ranting today. We can't have generational talents every year. That's not how generations work.
What about the generational guard?
I would actually. That would
what do you guys think of Will Hernandez?
He's
at 18?
good.
Yeah, at 18.
I like Will Hernandez. He reminds me of Mike Iupati a lot, who Solari coached in San Francisco. But I don't know if you could just take Will Hernandez and then just leave that hole in your draft. I don't know if I'd rather just trade down and try to get maybe Isaiah Wynn.
But you gotta be. That's the careful. Like, you can't keep compounding errors. Like, right? Like,
I know
we blew the McDowell pick. Whether for a variety of reasons. Took that, compounded it by trading our next, year's pick and other shit, and now we have a gap there. Then compounded that by, trading and getting rid of another round pick for so now you have that gap. You've made those are sunk costs, and so now you get into a situation of, all right, well, so now there's a player that works for us and we really believe in, but we did kind of leave this gap. We kind of screwed this. So we got to make sure we move back and fill those spots, or else, we won't be to me, at some point, it's like a sequence of if Hernandez is there and you think he can help your team, you believe in him, freaking take him.
But what if you think Austin Corbett's just as good?
Well, if you think he's just as good,
or what if you think that Austin Corbett's almost as good?
No, I'm not interested in almost as good.
They're close.
I'm done with
You
that.
can get another second-round pick.
Not interested in almost as good. I'm interested in give me the best player that you think has the best chance of being a difference-making starter for your team. And to make your point, Nathan, if you're like, I think this guy can be a decent starter, and there's another guy that can be a decent starter, then I'm okay. But if it's like this guy, he's a 70 on the scale, and this other guy is a 60. I'm sticking with even if it's a minor grade change, or a relatively minor. If all the work you did to get up the draft tells you that this guy's better, I would stick with that. And I'm sure analytics Twitter, including one of the ones that's on here, is like, dude, you don't know. Humans can't pick shit. You need more picks. That's not how it works. You have too much confidence in your ability to choose. I listen to analytics people all day at work. I get it. I know the science behind it. I think it's imperfect. I think even analytics people are imperfect. So,
but that's the point. That's the whole point. We're all imperfect.
Yes.
So, first of all, there's error bars on all these grades, right? And
yes.
Then I think the way grading it gives you like this definitive, like this person is better than this person. This person's 5.9 and this person's a 5.6. But we're talking about probabilities, right? Like the 5.9, maybe he's a 5.9 because he has a bigger. You think he has a bigger chance of like hitting if he hits it, he's really going to hit. He's going to be cool, and you're going to be jacked and pumped about him, right? But but then the probability that he flames out is higher than the 5.6, right? And so it's like this is all kind of I don't know. It's all imperfect, and it's all about probabilities, and there's error bars on these grades. And so, yeah, if you think Will Hernandez is a Pro Bowl type player, and you think Austin Corbett is a solid starter type player, that's a clear distinction, right? But if you're thinking, Will Hernandez is really, really good and Austin Corbett is really good, then that's not really like, go get another player who could be really good too, and get two really goods instead of one really, really good.
But look at how that play. I mean, to Jeff's point earlier, that's what they did last year. That's exactly what they did last year. Look what they did with those third round picks. You want another Tedrick Thompson? Is that what you're after? Like look what they did with trading back and getting
Tedrick
Justin
Thompson is a kick-ass special teams player, I've been told. The best.
He recovered a fumble last year.
Want a new best special teams player on the team? Yeah, give me all the Tedrick Thompson.
Dude, Nathan, I almost had Tedrick Thompson call you. I didn't know how that would turn out. I felt like that could turn ugly for both of us really quickly, so I let it go. So maybe next year.
I would have been very polite and respectful.
But seriously, though, right? Like, I don't know that the volume pick thing has worked well for the Seahawks necessarily in the third round. Like, second round, they've been relatively solid other than the McDowell pick. Almost every second round pick they've made, I think, has panned out all the way back to Golden Tate. Even Justin Britt was a second round pick, and he eventually panned out, right? First round,
I just haven't had them.
Value-wise, I don't know that they've gotten many first-round picks that were really first-round grades. I mean, let's go through it real quick. I mean, Okung and Earl, I think both those guys are first-round grades. Bruce, I don't think Bruce was a first-round. I don't think he's turned out to be a first-round grade. Would you guys? James Carpenter, I don't think is a first-round grade. Like, Fetty definitely isn't.
Ugh.
They have struggled in the first round. I mean, that to me is a stronger argument about they haven't really nailed the first round either. But every pick from 18 and above that they've made the first round has panned out pretty well. I mean, at least Bruce, he's maybe not a first round pick grade, but he's got more sacks than almost anyone else that came out that year.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with some of this is like Jermaine Ifedi, they traded back and got him, right?
Yeah.
But would you have rather them sat where they were and took him like they did with James Carpenter? Like, I mean, we can't just assume that they could have traded back and you got to get people to agree to the trade and who knows if somebody else left James Carpenter. But it seems realistic that maybe they could have dropped back a few picks and still gotten James Carpenter. Wouldn't that have been better? Like with Malik, right? Obviously, the Malik situation's a freak situation, and we probably shouldn't draw too many conclusions from that. There's probably internal stuff that the team should review in terms of how they assess character, and I think that's such a stupid thing, but maybe how they assess risk at least. Maybe there were other things that they knew that maybe would have given them an idea that this could have happened, although again, total freak thing. But the point being, aren't you at least glad that they traded back before they took him? They could have sat where they were and they could have taken him. They traded back a few times, right? And they could have sat in any one of those places and still taken him, assuming that obviously they liked him. Who knows where he was relative to other players that were still alive, but it's better to trade back and try to still get these guys when you're in these ranges that all these guys have similar grades.
So here's the thing though, Nathan, I get that. But I also want to make sure that analytics Twitter is acknowledging that is what's happened. And even the picks that have been acquired from trading back haven't generally worked out. So but
I mean, draft picks generally don't work out.
I'm just saying though that it's not like, you got to go with, that's the way to do it. And it's worked well. You look back at the 2012 draft, they had, I think it was the 12th pick, maybe the 11th, the 12th pick 11. To start with.
I think it was 12, yeah.
And I know they wanted Kuechly, and Kuechly went 9, and they traded back. They traded back at least once. They might have traded back twice to 15 to draft Irvin. Guess who went at 12? Fletcher Cox. And then Michael Brockers won at 14. And, those are real things that happen. Maybe they don't go exactly to analytics. Maybe those guys weren't on their boards and weren't who they would have picked in those situations. I don't know. Nobody knows for sure. I guess what I always just rail against a little bit is if you go by the numbers, it's always going to work out, because guess what? Humans are still going to make the goddamn draft pick. Like, wherever that pick happens, there's humans making those decisions based on grades and scouting and all these imperfections. And if you are not good at it, you're going to be not good at it wherever you make that pick. So it should work out statistically that you're better off, no matter whatever your level of grading and scouting ability is, to have more picks. No doubt. 100% agree with that. Get it. But to just say that that's always the way to go, and that, there's never a reason to stick where you are and take the best player available there, I think that's just myopic. I think it's missing the fact that there are just so many human factors and so many variables at play.
I think what made last year so frustrating is that they already did have the draft capital. They were pretty loaded last year.
Yeah.
And they got too cute, and that did hurt them. That's why this year's kind of a different scenario, where they have that huge hole in their draft, and that's why it's hard not to want to move down at this point unless someone really good fell to them. But the last 2 years, they were loaded with draft capital. They really positioned themselves well.
Last year was such a good time to do it, right? That was such a stacked draft. I mean, look at the talent that came out of that draft, and look, it was like kneeling in the Kenai River during the Red Run, and 100,000 fish coming through, and you come out with one. Like, came out with Shaq Griffin. Like,
whoa.
Yo. No Shaq Griffin hate on this podcast.
That's not hate. We came out with one.
No. Okay. I know what Nathan was going to say.
No.
What was he going to say?
Quill's great. Quill's great. Posick looks okay. He can still work out.
It was unbelievable how bad of a year he had, but continue.
Naz looks okay. Naz looks like he can play. We don't know what they are going to get out of Hill and Darbo. I think they got one stud and 2 probable starters. Like, that's okay
for third round.
Yeah, that's great for third round.
So it sounds like maybe John had a really good draft.
Look everywhere around those picks. Look everywhere around those picks, and tell me if you still feel the same way.
Yeah. I mean, I'll pull it up right now, but
I'm going to do the same thing.
Chris Carson might have been a good pick.
Yeah, Chris Carson might be okay.
About the density at the beginning.
No, this is not looking like a bad draft at all, though. Like, I definitely don't think you can just say that all they came away with is Quill. Like, yeah, that's their one. That's probably their big acquisition. That's probably going to be the one that really like has a chance at making Pro Bowls. But
right. So I mean, we know for a fact that they passed on. Essentially, and we know the story in the first round. So Tack McKinley, Tre'Davious White, Taco Charlton, TJ Watt, Reuben Foster, Ryan Ramchick, Kevin King, Cam Robinson, all those guys. Lost those guys.
Okay, but I guess White's okay. They don't tend to like to take corners there, so who knows if they're even on the board. I don't know that we're going to look back on a lot of these guys. I mean, we'll see with Ramchick and Robinson, and you can play a lot of what ifs there as if they take one of those guys, and then how does that change the Brown thing? But I mean, I don't know. McDowell was considered in that range, like quality wise, right? I mean, we could very easily be talking about McDowell as, a big part of this team.
Yeah, that would be a nice conversation. Yeah, I'm not seeing like as much total misses in the third round, although I have to admit, I'd have to go back and double check some of these players and how they played.
So they took Quill, right? And I don't think anyone's going to complain about that. They took him over John Johnson, Jordan Lewis, Montavis Adams, and Cameron Sutton. I don't think anyone is.
I don't think anybody's complaining about that.
Right. Now they take Delano Hill, which is a big TBD, right? They took him over Galladay, who was interesting, but ultimately didn't do a whole lot last year. Cridia Tankersley, who didn't do a lot. You know, we're looking at a lot of TBDs. We're Chad Williams, Rasul Douglas,
Yep.
Jonnu Smith, Brendan Langley, and then they take Naz, right? They take Naz over Trey Hendrickson, and then CJ Beathard, a quarterback.
Dude, CJ Beathard could have, completely changed the Seahawks last year.
Yeah, he could have. He could have made them a
whole
bunch worse.
He could have been their new GM. He would have brought his dad with him, and it would have been like huge. And
then you have Amaro Darboh, who they took over Kendall Beckworth and Vince Beagle and Jaleel Johnson. Some of these guys are interesting. D.D. Westbrook, but they didn't. I mean, Eddie Jackson. Eddie taking Darboh over Jackson and then turning around and taking. Oh no! They took Tedrick. They took Tedrick right before Eddie Jackson. That one's tough, but we don't need to belabor that.
Well, they took all of those guys over Eddie Jackson.
They did. They took all those guys over Eddie Jackson, and Naz and Quill. That's probably fine. We'll see on Hill and Darboh, and we'll see on Tedrick.
Yeah, Tariq Cohen. I know you would have been a big fan of his, but I like Tariq Cohen.
Tariq Cohen's all right.
He's a fun player.
Yeah. I don't know. Can he catch passes? I assume he can because he's small and shifty. Yeah, 53 balls, right? Yeah.
Jeff, sorry, we can go on forever. What else did you want to cover?
Do you want me to continue listing off fourth round picks in the 2017?
I was enjoying it, actually. I could do that all night. This is the part of the conversation I get into because we're geeks. We're football geeks.
Yeah. And I still think the problem area is the McDowell. It's not that what they did in the bottom, the third round was great. Griffin performed like a first round pick. I think NFL.com redid the draft. They always do that, and they gave him to Seattle at 26. So that was a great pick. But yeah, the area they really fell is if you look after the pick they trade down at 26. There's Tre'Davious White, Taco Charlton, P.J. Watt, Ryan Ramczyk, Kevin King, Cam Robinson. That's where they missed, not the third round.
I don't want to hear that list again. I just said it, and it's like it just punches me in the gut every time. Like, give me almost any of those players.
Yeah, because say you get those tackles, do you trade for Dwayne Brown? Do you have your third round pick? But I really like the Dwayne Brown thing. I think that's one of the reasons I'm actually excited about Seattle. I think no one's talking about him. But do you guys think they pick tomorrow?
No.
You don't think they pick it all tomorrow?
I
doubt
it.
Round. It's only one round.
Doubt it. I kind of think a quarterback's going to sneak down to him, and we'll see if any of those teams with a bunch of ammo in the second round want to come up and get one. If the Giants go Saquon at 2, which is what they're rumoring to do, then they're a candidate to jump up. Who knows what the Browns will do? It's not crazy to think that they could come away with like a Saquon Chubb 1-4, and then maybe they're looking to jump up and grab somebody that slips down, a quarterback that slips down to Seattle. So there's just so much in the second round, so many quarterback needy teams. Denver, I think they got Case, right? Case Keenum, but
yep.
Obviously still in need of a QB of the future. So and they've made that deal with Denver before, so I think they end up getting it. And then there's always opportunity too that they trade down 5-6 picks and they trade down 5-6 more picks. And so I think odds are they end up not picking it all tomorrow.
It'd be fun to see them pick in the mid-20s, slide back once.
Yeah.
They have one first round pick in 5 years. It's crazy.
I'll give you an if then here. It's if they trade Earl tomorrow, then they're going to pick. If not, then they probably won't.
What if they trade? Oh, go ahead.
Why are the Cowboys the only team that got mentioned for Earl? Does no one else want Earl? Like, why aren't the Bucks interested in Earl? Or why aren't the Browns interested in Earl? Like, why is it only Dallas? Just because he asked to play there?
Yeah, and everybody loves America's team. But there have been rumors about Tampa. that I think Tampa is just in a weird spot for it to happen. Although the second round pick makes more sense than Dallas' second round pick.
Yeah, I guess I would just say, like, did you know Percy Harvin was going to get traded to,
Seattle,
Buffalo when he left, or whatever it was, like
the Jets.
The Jets, yeah, that's right, the Jets. Like, the Seahawks keep things pretty quiet. Cowboys are the ones that have obvious ties. So that's what everyone's talking about. There could absolutely be other places that they're having discussions with. But they generally, it's not common to trade players, during the draft. I mean, we saw it with like Leon, God, what was his name from
Washington?
Yeah, Leon Washington from the Jets. Like, we saw that in 2010 and a couple other things like that. But Lendale White. But I just have this feeling that tomorrow's kind of the make or break day for whether they're gonna keep Earl, because once they get past this draft, I don't see a reason why Earl wouldn't be on the team next year. And then you're in this situation of, okay, now what? Are you going to walk away with him? Are you going to give him a contract? All that kind of stuff comes into play. So I think tomorrow's the D-Day for that. And
yeah, if they sit at 18 and they take somebody, then I think it's red alert for a pending Earl trade. Like, it could happen before tomorrow's draft, but if it doesn't happen and then they sit at 18 and they take somebody, something's going on.
What's if they pick at 18? Who and not like some, what position do you hope they pick? Not necessarily a specific player.
It's just going to be about who falls to them. Because if you're sitting at 18, it's the whole blue chip thing. You think somebody that didn't have any business getting to you got to you. And then it's just a question of who is that? It's probably not Mike McGlinchey or a Connor Williams, who are good players, but probably not blue chip players, right? Maybe it's Harold Landry. Maybe it's Derwin James. Maybe
fill in, not for all the listening audience that doesn't know all their position groups. You named a safety, and go ahead.
Yeah, so McGlinchey and Connor Williams are the two probably top tackles, offensive tackles. They look like good, not great players. Derwin James is the safety out of Florida State. He's kind of imagine maybe like a Taylor Mays, except good, is kind of what he is. So he looks kind of special. And he's a guy that you could see maybe Seattle really, really liking. Harold Landry is Cliff Averill type, but I think a ceiling that's higher than him. And he's a guy that could slip. It'd be kind of surprising if he did. But he had a little bit of a rough 2017, was dealing with some injuries and stuff, was much better in 2016. But definitely looks like, maybe the top end prospect in this draft, other than Chubb probably, I guess. So I don't really know who the other guys are. I haven't watched a lot of these guys because they're not supposed to get down to Seattle, but like, people rave about Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Mm-hmm.
He's a DB, kind of a nickel safety guy out of Alabama. Roquan Smith, he's another guy that, like, maybe off-ball linebacker falls. That's not crazy to think about, but then you're talking about looking at an off-ball linebacker, and he looks pretty special, but 18, don't pick again until 120 special? I don't know.
Come on, if Roquan Smith fell, there's no way he's not worth taking. That guy's a monster.
I mean, Aaron Curry was too. Like, let's. I don't know. I mean, he looks great, like, no doubt. But positional value there seems pretty low. And then
Evan, you have a position that, like, regardless of player, that if they stuck there, that you're just like, oh man, I'd love it if they just got a player that was awesome in this position.
Defensive back. I'd love to see a nasty trash talking corner or a safety back there. Derwin James would be awesome at 18. I don't think he's going to fall to 18. I think I saw some tweet rumors earlier today that there's like he's probably going to go top 10, which makes sense, I think. So if he fell to 18, oh boy, goodbye Earl Thomas. Just kidding. Didn't actually say that, but draft Derwin James.
How about you, Jeff?
I think pass rusher's the area there. I think Frank Clark's nearing the end of his deal. I assume they're going to extend him, but Deion Jordan they have, but who knows? He might have been a flash in the pan. I think that's an area they've shown they like to draft early. I think there's some guys. Nathan mentioned Landry, who I gave them. He does remind me a lot of Averill, and I think if they had those picks, he could be pretty good value. Marcus Davenport has the toolsy guy. Kind of reminds me of Ziggy Ansah.
That's who CJ likes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's a really intriguing prospect, but he's very raw, and 2018 is going to be a learning curve for sure, especially against the NFC West. I think Evan made an interesting point because the Seahawks have never taken a corner higher than Shaq Griffin. Before last draft is ever higher in the 4th round. And there's a rumor today that went around from Tony Pauline, who's been pretty good at nailing Seattle's interest, that they're targeting a corner from Colorado named Isaiah Oliver in a move down scenario. And there was a lot of rumors that they really wanted Kevin King last year and that double move down that didn't work out. So corner's a position to watch. I think there's a clear hole besides Shaq or Quill. I don't know what his nickname is. And they haven't got Byron Maxwell back.
You got to get used to calling him Quill because when they draft Shaquem,
right,
you can't just say Shaq anymore.
Exactly.
You got to specify.
Exactly. You solved it right there. I'm fully on board with that. If they can find a way to get him, that would be exciting. But yeah, I think corner's one to watch. They have a clear hole in their roster. Dante Johnson signed a nothing deal. He could easily get cut. They need another corner, and I think Isaiah Oliver fits their mold. People keep giving him Josh Jackson, the guy from Iowa, but he doesn't have that Seattle look of a corner. I don't see them using 18 on him. So if they move back somewhere 29 to 34, I think that might be corner.
I think I bring up on the corner position too is I love discussing like the salary discrepancy between like an elite corner, of the position groups. For example, like, corners are super cheap, obviously, in the draft, but when they get extended for elite, if they're elite, they get paid huge coin. So to get like a really good corner on a cheap 4-year, maybe 5-year contract, if you select in the first round, love the thought of that.
Yeah, safety. I would much prefer them to find another safety. I'm like the only person that isn't like super excited about the Bradley McDougald deal. Like, I'm fine that he's back.
People are excited about that?
What's that?
People are excited about the McDougald deal.
Like, they're super excited. Yeah, they're like, oh my god, he was a steal, and really? He was a solid player when he played last year. And I'm like, yeah, he was totally solid. He's a great third safety. I don't want him as a starter. Like, if that's your top end, and you already know what he is. He's not going to like become better than what he's been so far. So, I'm personally like, all right, now he's blocking me from learning about Delano Hill and whether he has a higher upside. Whether or not he's worse as a player right now, I don't care. Like, I want upside. I want someone that can be great. So like, I would love them to find a safety. Derwin James is definitely an exciting name. Doesn't seem like that's going to work out, but weird thing for me is like, I am very curious about the first offensive lineman that they pick with Mike Solari, and really the first offensive line they pick without Mike, or since Tom Cable left. What does this front office look like when they don't have the specter of, the worst offensive line personnel whisperer, in football, leaning over their shoulders?
I mean, my hot take here is I think Austin Corbett's going to be their first pick. And I think they're going to pick him a lot sooner than people think. I think people kind of, I don't know, it varies so much. But I could see them trading down early second and then taking Austin Corbett with their first pick. I I really like him, and he seems like he could line up really well with what they want. He'd play guard for them. He's that strong mauler type. He's really cool though in that he's not a strong mauler type like Jermaine Ifedi, who is big and as fast as you would expect him to be. He's got a lot of snap and pop, and he strikes you. And he plays he plays the pass really well too. He's got good feet, not tackle feet, but good feet for a guard. I think they're probably going to love this guy. They've been linked to him. He would slot right in as a starting guard, which they need. He fits the whole let's get back to running the ball thing that they want to do. I expect that they're gonna like him a lot, and I'll be. Maybe if they don't take him first overall. I mean, maybe I'm way off on where he ends up going, but I'll be fairly surprised if they leave this draft without him.
I like Billy Price too.
Yeah, that's the other one. Yeah, he's cool. I don't like him as much as Corbett, but Price is he's fun.
All right, let's wrap this up. There's been a request for a food take from Evan before we leave, and you've given you plenty of time to think about this, Evan. So please pass along a food take that we can all react to.
It's 2-1.
Look how proud he is. Oh my gosh. For people that are just listening on the audio podcast, you're missing his face.
Number 1, mustard is bad.
What kinds of mustard?
All of it.
Whoa.
All mustard is bad, number 1. And number 2, ketchup is highly overrated.
Who rates ketchup?
It's like Bradley McDougald.
Ketchup is amazing. What is wrong with you guys?
Let me clarify on ketchup, on my stance on ketchup. If it's given to me, I'll eat it. But I'm not going to go out of my way to ask for ketchup.
What about
if somebody puts a thing of fries down in front of you, and they ain't animal style or anything, they're just crinkle cut fries, and there's no ketchup that you see, you're not going up and saying, "Do you have ketchup? Could I get some ketchup?" No. You're just going to eat the
waste of my time.
You're a naked fry guy?
Yeah.
No, he's an animal style fry guy.
Well, yeah, animal styles. Oh, it's so good. I mean, fries alone are really good.
I don't know how your food takes never disappoint, Evan, but they are consistently just the worst. You don't like stone ground mustard? Honey mustard?
I don't think I've ever had. What was the first one?
Stone ground? It's like the stuff like when you get like if you get like traditional German food, it's like the like with your bratwurst or whatever. Yeah, so it's got a little grit to it.
I'm with you, Evan. I actually like other than the ketchup part, the mustard piece.
The spicy mustard stuff, that you get with like
it's horrible.
The pork.
It's horrible.
What?
What about like a smoked meat sandwich?
You know where you should add mustard though, Evan?
Where?
One place I like mustard. Egg salad.
Oh.
Or potato salad.
Yeah, that's a valid other place. If you combine mustard with mayo in some way, you may find some happiness there. So give it a shot.
Maybe.
All right, guys.
We're like 5 minutes away from Evan tweeting out that he's never eaten mustard before, though.
Awesome. Hey, guys, it's been great. We'll get back together next week to talk about what happened in this draft and probably talk more about schedule. We were going to talk about that tonight, but we had too much fun talking about all this other stuff. So take care and go Hawks.